Assalamu alaikum students. In the last lecture, we have started the topic of list in Python, and we have learned that how we can create a list or how we can change some items in the list. And we also learned that what are the methods that through which we can access the different elements in the list. Okay. Today we will continue with the same topic and we will see how we can use a for loop to iterate through the list. Okay, so there are basically two methods, and then we will see how we can find some item in a list, and we will also try to remove or add the new items in the list by using the remove or the append method. Okay, so let's start. Okay, we can use the for loop to iterate through the list when we do this, or actually the target variable of the loop assumes that each value of the element assumes each value of each element in the list in order. Okay, for example, this is the code in which we have created a list and it has 3 elements, that is 1, 2 and 3. Okay, so when we will use the for loop, this means we are saying that this is a variable and we are saying that for x in my list. Okay, and print x. What it's doing actually, it is assuming this variable as the value of the element. Okay, so it will print all the elements which are in the list. Okay, as we can say that this is the output. In each iteration, it is picking the value or of the element in the list in a sequence. First it printed the first element, then the second element and the third element. Okay, okay, this means a for loop is a very convenient way to sequentially iterate through the list. Okay, and the target variable in a for loop assumes the value of the current item in the list as we iterate through the loops. Okay, as we have considered this code, in this code we have considered a list and we have actually iterated through the list by using the for loop. Okay, and when we have printed the loop, it has actually given the all the items of the for loop. Okay, but whenever we use this method, actually the target variable isn't very helpful in case we want to change the value of the item in the list. Okay, because since it's a copy of the data that exists in the list. For example, here we are using the n and we are assuming that n is actually accessing the element in the loop in the list. Okay, so we are changing that element, but actually this is a copy of the element, so it will not apply any change on these items or the value of these items. Okay, so the result will be same. We according to this code, actually we have applied some changes on the values of the elements, but when after completing the complete iterations of the for loop, when we try to print this list, we actually get the same list. There was no change. Okay, so basically this is the drawback of using the for loop to iterate through the list. Okay, so what should we do in case we want to change the list items? So just recall that in the last lecture we have discussed that in order to change an item, we need to know the index number of the item you wish to change. For example, there's a list in which there are 3 items, 1, 2, 3, and in case we want to change the first item, we need to access that item through its index number. In this line, actually we are assigning the value 999 to the my list at the index number 0. So what was the value at the index number 0? That was 1. So when we are assigning 999 at index number 0, this means it will replace the value 1, or it will override the value 1 by the 999. Okay, so this means whenever we want to change our item, we need to know, or we need to access the item through the index number of the list. Okay, okay, basically there are 2 main techniques for iterating over the list using the index value. How? First of all, we can set up a counter variable outside the list, and then we can use that counter to iterate through the loops. For example, we can continuously updating the variable as we move to the next position in the list. Okay, so in this way we are actually accessing, we are using that counter as the index number. Okay, so this means we are trying to access the elements or the values of that elements through this counter. Okay, and the second method is using the range functions. Range function to create the custom range that represents the size of the list. For example, we will start the range function with the starting variable as 0, and we will use the end variable as the length of the list. Okay, so let's say in detail that what are these two methods and what is the difference between these two methods. Okay, first we are using a counter variable and a for loop to iterate over the list. Okay, in case we set up a variable outside of our loop, then we can use it to keep track of where we are in the list. For example, this is the example code. In this we have a list, again the same list which has 3 elements, 1 2 3, and we have set a counter that is equal to 0. So this means for every item in my list, this item is actually showing that this is the element in the list. So we this line will actually iterate to the every item. Okay, so when we want to access that item to its index number, so we are using actually another variable that is counter. In case we will use this line that my list, and then in square brackets we are using the counter, as we have initiated the counter, or we are using the value of counter in the first iteration as 0. So this means actually this line means that my list and the index number is 0. Okay, so this means by this value we are actually accessing the element of the list by its index number. So in case we assign some value by the index number to this element of the list by its which is accessed by its index number, then if we try to change that value, there will be a change in this value. For example, in this example we are accessing that element and we are multiplying that element by 2, and then we are assigning to the same element. Okay, this means we are actually assigning the changed value to the same element at the same index number. Okay, so again in the next line we will increment the counter because we want to change the index number. So in the next iteration when we will come back in the next iteration, then here it will access the second element of the list, because now it will become, the counter will become 1. So this means next time it will access the my list and the index number is 1. Okay, so this means next time whatever the change will be made, it will be applied to the element which is at the index number 1. Okay, so after this, when we will, after the completion of this, after the complete iteration of this for loop, when we will try to print the complete list, we will see that there's a change. Okay, this means that change is actually applied to the elements by, because we have accessed, this time we have accessed the elements of the list by their index number. Okay, let's try this on Python so we can clearly comprehend the difference between these two things. Okay, first of all, we will simply iterate over the list by using the for loop. Okay, for example, first we will make a list. For example, there's a list in the L variable. Let's we create a list of 3 elements, that is 1 2 and 3. Okay, when we use a for loop, for this is a sum variable x in L, which is the name of the list, and we want to print the each element. So we want to print x as x is the variable which is actually contains the element, uh, each element of the list in each iteration. First, it will have the first element in it, and then in the next iteration, it will have the second item in itself. Then on the third iteration, it will have the third item in itself. Okay, so when you will print print the complete list, it will simply print the all the items. Okay, so let's run this program. We can see it has simply printed all the items of the elements. Okay, let's say now we want to change to this element. Okay, so what we will do, we will simply assign the x by adding some changes. For example, we want to multiply by 2 each item, multiply by 2. So this means we are actually multiply x by 2. Sorry, let's say we multiply by 3. Okay, so this means we will multiply each item by 3 and then we will assign to the same item. Okay, so at the end of this loop, when we will try to print this loop complete list, then we will see if the change is applied or not. Okay, we want to print the list. Okay, now we will run this program and we will see if there's a difference or not. We can see that it has printed the complete list. Okay, now if we will try to access each element of the list through its index number, this means for this purpose we need to use some counter. We can use the variable c, which is actually we will assign the initial value as 0. Okay, so for x is the item or the element in the list, and we are accessing that elements, and when we want to apply the change, we will actually apply it through its index number. As c has the index number because c is starting with the 0, and we are using the c as to first the index number. So this means we will use c in the place of index number, and when we will try to apply the change, or we want to apply some operation on these items, we are actually accessing these with the help of the index number. So this means it will access the item through its index number. Sorry, we'll use the c variable because it will change. Okay, and then we will multiply by 3, and then we will assign to the same item. Okay, so at the end of this loop, when we will try to print the list, these changes will be right. This means it will print 3, and in the next iteration, when the value of and we need to increment the we will increment that counter. This c variable is actually, we are treating this variable as a counter, so we will increment the counter. So this means in the next iteration, this c will have the value 1. So this means we will actually access the second item of the list, which has the index number 1. Okay, and in the third iteration, we will access the third item of the list because it will have the index number that is equal to 2. Okay, so after applying this operation on each item, it will give the values. For example, in the first iteration, it will multiply 3 by 1, so it will be 3. In the next iteration, it will multiply by 3 by the values 2, so it will multiply 3 by 2, its value will be 6. And in the third iteration, we will have the value 3 from the list, and we will multiply 3 by 3, it will be 9. Okay, so let's run this program. Okay, we have a list L and we have a counter variable 0, and then we are using the for loop with the in operator for x in L, and we are using the list of, okay, sorry, we have used the wrong variable. Actually, we are using the list and the index number, then again the list with the index number, and then we are using the multiplication operation, and then we will increment the counter, and at the end we will print the list. So let's run this program. Okay, we can see it has printed a 3, 6, and 9. Okay, so this means the change is applied actually. So we were discussing that whenever we want to apply some change and we are using the for loop, then we should use a counter variable and a for loop to iterate over the list. Otherwise, the change will not be applied. Okay, so what is the next method? As we want to access the each item of the list by using the for loop, we can also use the range function. Okay, how we can use a range function? We will use the range function to construct a custom range that represent all the indexes in the list. Okay, for example, this is the same list that has the values 1, 2, and 3, and we are using for counter. This means this is a variable. We can use any variable here. It will actually get the value of that list. Okay, and in range, this means the range method actually uses the only the range variable, but we can also use the start variable, then the range variable, or we can say the end variable, and we also use the increment variable. So here we are using the two parameter. We have passed the two parameters. This means the first one is the start variable and the last one is the end variable. And in the case of the end variable, actually we have used the length method. In the last lecture, I guess we have discussed about the length method. In the length method, for example, the length of my list, what it will give? It will give the length of the list. This means if case there are 3 items in the list, it will give the length equal to 3. In case if there are 10 elements in the list, it will give the value 10. Okay, we can see this. Let's say this is a list and we want to print the length of the list, that is actually L. Okay, so it should print the value 3. We can see it's 3. In case you will increase the number of elements, let's say if we add one another element, it should give the 4. Okay. So we are discussing that we are using the n variable as the length of the my list. In case length of the list is 3, so this means the starting variable is 0 and the end variable is 3. So it will move from the index number 0, 1, and 2, because 3, that is the length of the my list, is actually the range. This thing, the last or this variable value of the variable, that is not included. This means the 3 is not included because it is showing the range of the index number. Okay, so in case we can use the same method by using the range function. We are accessing the elements of the list with their index number, and for this purpose we are using the range method. Okay, so we can see that this is the list for counter in range 0 to length of my list. It will, and that counter, or we can use any variable, that counter will actually iterate from 0 to 2, 0, 1, and 2, and in each iteration, first iteration it will have the value 0, in the second iteration it will have the value 1, and in the third iteration it will have the value 2. And this means it will access all the 3 elements because the last index number is 2, because this has the index number 0, it has the index number 1, and it has the index number 2. The length of the list is 3, but the index number are from 0 to 2. Okay, so we can also apply some changes because we are, with this method we are also accessing the elements by using the index number. Okay, so let's try this method also. We have a list with the 4 elements and we are using the for loop for, let's say, x in range, it will start from 0 and then the length of L, which is actually the list. Okay. Okay, now we want to apply some changes. So we will say okay, we will now this X has the value, okay, value of the index number. So this means now X is acting as the is used for the iterating to the index number. Okay, so we can use that. For example, the list of X will show the index number, and then we can apply any changes to this list with the index number X. Let's say this time we also multiply by 4. Okay, this time we don't need to increment the counter because X is acting as a counter, and we have used the range method. Range method automatically, or it's by default, increment by 1 value. Okay, in case you want to increment by some different value, we can use the increment variable as well. Okay, so in this case we have not used the third parameter, which is actually the increment variable or the step variable. So this means it will increment by default by 1. Okay, so in the next iteration X will have the 1, and in the third iteration X will have the value that is equal to 2. Okay, so at the end we will try to print the list, and the list name is L. Okay, to small. Okay, now we can run this program. We will see the change will be applied on these elements. First we'll print 4, then it will print 4 multiplied by 2 is 8, and 4 multiplied by 3 is 12, and 4 multiplied by 4 is 16. We can see it's 4, 8, 12, and 16. Okay. Okay, in the last lecture you discussed about the slicing list. Sometimes we need to extract the multiple items from the list. In case we want to access the one item, we can simply access the item by its index number. In case we want to extract the multiple items from the list, the Python contains some built-in function that make it easy for us to slice out the portion of the list. How? In case we want to slice a list, we use a series of slice indexes. This means this time we are not using the single index. Actually, we are using the series of index to tell the Python which elements you want to extract. For example, this is a variable, and we want to this variable is actually a list, new list, in which we want to extract some elements from another list. Okay, so we will use the start index number and then colon, and we are use the end index number. So actually we are using the range method as well. Okay, so what it will do, it will start from the start index number and the end index number, and it will extract that these values, or we can say that multiple items from the list, and then it will assign to the new list. Okay, so Python will copy out the elements from the list on the right side of the assignment operator based on the start and end indexes, and it will assign to the right side of the assignment operator. Okay, so note that the indexes work just like the range function. We will grab the items up until the end index, but we will not grab the end index itself. This means if we use the index number 4, it will not include the 4 index number. It will start from the 0 in case the start was 0. So it will extract the variables from 0, 1, 2, and 3. 4 will not be included. Okay. Okay, now we can discuss. Let's discuss that we can also find the items in the list. How we can find the item in the list? For example, we can easily find a particular item in a list by using in operator. For example, this is a list and it has 3 eatables. For example, the pie, cake, and pizza. For example, we want to search if the cake is in this list. So what we will do, we will use the if statement. If the cake in the name of the list. In case this is found, actually this statement, this in operator, let you the search for the item in the list, and it always returns the boolean value. Either it will give the true value or it will give the false value. In case this statement is this item is found in the list, it will give the true. This means this if statement is true, then it will run this statement. In case this statement is false, the cake is not in the list, this means it will give the boolean value which is equal to false. So we will move to the else statement. So it will say no cake is found. Okay, so let's try these both things on the Python. Okay, as we said, it is like a range function. This means it will also use the start index, end index, and it can also use the third index. Okay, so in case if we omit the first start index, that is the range function, we use the start variable. In the slice operation, in this case, we are using the omit the start index in the slice operation. The Python will start at the first element of the list. This means from the 0 index. Okay, till the end index which is given. Okay, so in case we omit the end index in the slice operation, the Python will automatically will go until the last element of the list. For example, the length of the list is 7, so it will move till the 6th index number. Okay, let's say we should write 6. The length of the length of the list is 7, so this means the last unit number is 6. So in case we omit the end index in the slice operation, it will go until the last element of the list, that is 6. And in case we apply the third index number, the Python will assume that we want to use a step value, that is we want to use the increment variable. So this will work the same as the step value we use in the range function. This means it will give the increment value. Okay, by default it increments by 1. In case we give some variable or the value to this step value, then it will use that value. Okay. Okay, for this example, we're using a list with the 7 items, that is from 1 to 7. We can see the length of, we can print the length of this list. Let's say by the length function, and then list name is L. We can run. Okay, the length of the list is 7. In case we want to print the or slice the objects list, we can use the another list, that is L2, and we can use the slice method by, let's say we want to slice some items from the list, that is L. Let's say we want to slice from 2 to 5. Sorry, we will use colon. So what it will do, it will pick the index number 2 and it will move till 5, and the 5 will not be included. For example, 1, 0, 1 and 2, it will print the 2 index number which has the value 3, and it will move till 5. This means 5 will not be included. So this means it will start from the 3, and that is index number 2, index number 4, and index number 5 will not be included. Okay. Sorry, index number 2, index number 4, and index number, okay, say. Let's run this program. Okay, we have not printed that. We need to print this list. This is L2. We have sliced the list L, and we have assigned to the list 2. So we will print the L2. It will print 3, 4, and 5. Okay. This means it printed the index number 2, 3, 4. It actually it has not included the index number 5, which has the value 6. So it only printed the 3, 4, and 5. Okay. Let's say if we omit the first variable, it will print from the start. Okay, the first value, second, third, and till the fourth index number. Fifth index number is not included. And let's say if we omit the last variable, it will move to the end of the list. This means it will also include the last index number. We can see it has printed a 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. This means started with index number 2, that was 3, 4, index number 2, index number 3, index number 4, index number 5, index number 6. And 6 was the last index number, okay? Okay. Okay, now let's try to find some string in the list. For example, this is the list of a string, different values. This means it has the alphabets. Let's try to find, in case we want to find some element in the list, we can simply find by using the for loop. For, let's say we want to find if the D is in the list, we will use that E, and we use the in operator in name of the list. In case, we will use the if statement. If E is in L, then we can simply print some statement. For example, we can say that the E is found in list L. Okay. In case it is not found, as we have said that this statement will return the Boolean value, that it will return either the true value or the false value. Okay. So this means in case the statement is true, it will print this statement, and in case this statement is false, then we are using the else statement. We can simply print it not found. Okay. Okay, now let's run this program. Okay, E is found in list 1. The spelling of found is wrong. You can see E is found in the list. Okay. Similarly, we can try to find some other element. Let's say, okay, let's try to find the element which is not in the list. Let's say we seek its edge, and we will try to find the edge in the list. So it should give that it is not found. Okay. Not found. Okay. Okay, we have seen that we can add the element in the last lecture. We have discussed that we can add the items in the list. Okay, we have used the repeat method, that we can use the static operator, or we can use the concatenation operator. Another way to add the item, irrespective of the fact that we have created the list by adding some elements. Okay, in case there's a list and we want to add some item in the list. Okay, so there's a way to add the item in the list is to use the append method. What is append method? Append method is a function that is built into the list data type, and it allow you to add item to the end of the list. For example, there's a list and there are 3 names in the list. In case we want to add another name, that is Kate, and we will use the append function, that is mylist.append, and Kate, it will add this name at the end of the list. Okay, at last index number. And when we will try to print this list, it will print that name at the end of the list. Okay. Similarly, in case we want to sort the list items, for example, this is a list, and we want to then in case we want or we add some other element or add some value in the list. Let's say in this example, we have added another table, that is apple, and then we have printed the list. It has all the items. For example, in case we want to sort this list, what we will do, we will simply use the sort function, that is mylist.sort. What it will do, um, it will arrange the items of the list in the ascending order. Okay, so let's try by adding the item and sort method in the Python. Okay, let's say we want to append another item. So what we will do, we will simply use the append method. Let's say L dot append, and we want to fg, we will append another element, that is g. And when when we will print this list, it will have the g as well. Okay, you can see the g is added. Okay, okay, let's say if we change the values, let's say it's r and it's c. Okay, so let's try to sort this list. Okay, in case we want to now sort this list, this means it will arrange all the values in the ascending order. Let's say we use the sort function, and sort function is okay. L dot sort, this means all the elements in the L list, they will arrange the elements of the L list in the ascending order. So after using this method, we will print the list. So it should print A, B, C, D, F, and then R. Okay. Okay, A, B, C, D, F, and R. Okay, so it has sorted the list. Okay. Okay, we can also find the position of an item in the list. For example, we can use the index method to ask the Python to tell you the index of the item in a list. For example, the index method takes one argument, an element to be searched for, and then returns the integer value of where that element can be found. For example, this is the code in which we have a list with the 3 elements. In case we search the pi in my list, and we will use a variable location which will actually give the index number. We are using the index method, that my list.index, and we are passing the argument or parameter as the value what we want to search or we want to find in the list. Okay, so it will actually give the index number of that element. Okay, so we can simply print that position or the location of that element or the index number of that element. Okay. Okay, similarly, we can get the largest and the smallest value in the list. Python has 2 built-in functions that will let you to get the highest and lowest value in the list. These are called the minimum and maximum. For example, we want to get the biggest value, we will use the max function. This is a list with the name prices, and it has 3 prices. If we will use the max function, that is actually built-in function for the list, we will use the max function and then we'll use the list name. It will give the biggest value. Similarly, if we use the minimum function, it will give the smallest value. And if we will print these values, so definitely it will give the smallest and the biggest values. Okay, let's try these on Python. Okay, we can see that we have created the using the same mode list, and we want to find the C element here, as we'll use a statement that if the C is list L, and then we will use the index method, that we will use a variable that is index, okay, and we will assign the index number to this variable. So we are using the index method as L dot index and the value which what we want to find in the list, okay. So it will, in case this value is found, it will return the index number which is actually saved in this variable. So in case this statement is true, C is in the list L, it will assign the index number to this variable, and we will print that index number for the item C is, then we will print this variable. So it should print the index number of the value of C, okay. So let's run this program. Okay, then index number for item C is 4. Let's check in the list. C is here. So item index number is 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so it has given the index number that is 4. Okay, similarly, we can get the maximum and the minimum value. Okay, let's use the same list and we will try to print the maximum value. Let's say we are using the print function and we will use the max function on the list L. So it should print the maximum value, which is actually the R, okay? So let's run. So you can see. Similarly, we can find the minimum value of list L. Maximum is R and minimum is A, okay? Okay, we can also remove the items from the list by using the method that, for example, there's a list that 3.9 and it has 3 prices. So the name of the list is prices, and we can use simply the remove method, that is prices.remove, and it will remove the element from the list. When we will print again, when we will again print the list, it will not have the value that is 2.99. Okay, so let's try this on Python. Let's say we have the same list. Okay, we have the list with the alphabets. We can remove any element of this list. Let's say by using the remove method, that is L by dot remove, and we will use that method. For example, we want to remove R. Okay, and then okay, now first print the list. Okay, after removing this element, when we will print the list, it should not have the value or the element R. Okay, now let's try to run this program. Okay, it's A, B, D, C, and F. Okay, the R is removed. Okay. Okay, we can also use the reverse method. We can use the reverse method on the list to reverse this element, but actually it does not in reverse the elements in a way that it will not sort the list in the reverse order. But actually the reverse method simply shuffle the elements of the list such that at the first items, the first element of the list, it becomes the last element, and the second element becomes the second last element. Okay, it actually does not sort in the reverse order. It simply shuffles the element in the reverse order, which are initially in the according to the sequence in which the list is available. Okay, so for example, we'll try to run this on. Okay, we are using the reverse method on the same list. It has the first element A, second is a B. So according to the reverse method, it will shuffle the elements in a case that the last item will become the first element and the second last element will become the second element. Let's say if first F will become first element and the C will become the second element. Okay, let's run this program. Okay, we can see that F is the first element and C is the second element and D is the third element. You can see it has shuffle or it has reverse elements. Okay, okay, in the next lecture we will practice some problems using the list, and we will also try to use some functions from the different modules. Like we will use some random we will use some functions of that random module by using the list. Okay, so this is the end of our lecture. Allah Hafiz.